This video was brought to you by Brilliant. On Saturday, Australia went to the polls to elect their new government. And only a couple of months ago, it looked like Peter Dutton's coalition were on track to oust Anthony Albanese's incumbent Labour government. But after a sudden swing in the polls, Labour actually ended up winning a larger majority than they did in 2022, paving the way for another 3 years of Albanese's cautious progressivism. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Australia's electoral system, what happened on Saturday, and what this means for Australia going forwards. We're getting ever closer to 1 million subscribers, and 68% of you aren't even subscribed yet. So lend us a hand and subscribe today. So before we get into the results, let's start by explaining Australia's electoral system, because it's pretty quirky. Australia has a bicameral parliament with 2 chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is really the House of Government, and it's where most bills originate. The Senate is more of a House of Review that's supposed to review and approve legislation from the House of Representatives. Anyway, the Senate has 76 members, with 12 senators from each state, and 2 more from each of the internal territories, who are elected using the single transferable vote, or STV, election system, with the states and territories functioning as multi-member constituencies. This means that, to get elected, candidates need a set number of votes, known as the quota, and voters can rank multiple candidates in order of preference. First preference votes are then counted up, and any candidate who reaches the quota is elected. Their second preference votes are then redistributed, and then either another candidate reaches the quota, and their next preference votes are redistributed, or if no candidate reaches the quota, the least popular candidate is removed, and their second preference votes are redistributed. And this process then repeats until the required number of candidates have reached the quota. However, only 40 senators are elected at each election, 6 from each state, and all 4 from the territories. The House of Representatives, on the other hand, has 151 members, who are elected via single-member constituencies, with each constituency drawn so as to represent an equal number of voters. These MPs are elected using the alternative vote electoral system. This is a bit like first past the post, but if no candidate gets 50% of the votes, then the least popular candidate is eliminated and their second preference votes are redistributed. This process is repeated until one candidate gets above 50% of the vote. Now, AV systems protect against the vote splitting that you risk in a first past the post system, but in practice, the results are actually pretty similar. And historically, about 90% of seats have been won by the candidate who also won the most first preference votes. This difference in the electoral system means that the 2 chambers have very different compositions. The House of Representatives is usually dominated by MPs from the big parties, but because of the multi-member constituencies, the Senate has more independents and minor party representation. This divergence is exacerbated by the fact that voting is compulsory in Australia. If you don't vote without a good reason, you have to pay a $20 fine, which can help funkier candidates pick up votes from people who would have otherwise just stayed home. And as such, it's very rare for any party to have a majority in both the House and the Senate. Anyway, for most of modern history, Australia's federal politics has been dominated by 2 big parties. On the left, you've got Labour, and on the right, you've got the Liberal National Coalition, generally just known as the Coalition. Elections are held every 3 years, and at the last one, back in 2022, the Coalition, who have been in power since 2013, lost their majority to Labour, winning just 58 seats to Labour's 77. This was the first Labour majority since 2007, and the worst result for the Coalition since 1946. The other big story in the election was the success of the Greens, who won 4 seats, and the so-called Teal Independents, a term used to describe a set of socially liberal localist candidates who won 7 seats, all in urban areas formerly dominated by the Coalition. This was in part because Australians were tiring of the 2 main parties, whose collective primary vote share has fallen from about 85% in the 2000s to less than 70% today. This erosion of the traditional 2-party system has also occurred in other countries with similar political systems, like the UK, where the 2 main parties are collectively polling at about 40%, or Canada, where the 2 main parties increasingly struggle to achieve outright majorities. Anyway, until quite recently, it looked like the coalition, led by former police officer Peter Dutton, were on track to oust Labour. Unfortunately for Dutton, in the past few weeks the polls have turned against him, and on Saturday Labour actually ended up winning by more than they won in 2022. At the time of writing, with about 70% of the votes counted, Labour are projected to win 35% of primary votes and 85 seats in the House of Representatives, while the coalition are on track to win just 31.5% of primary votes and 36 seats. This is obviously a pretty good result for Albanese and Labour, but really they only won this many seats because the coalition did terribly, and Labour's primary vote share only increased slightly on 2022. In fact, it's almost exactly the same percentage as Labour leader Bill Shorten got in 2016, which he actually lost to Malcolm Turnbull's coalition. The point we're trying to make here is that this was an absolutely terrible result for the coalition, who saw their primary vote share fall by 4 points and suffered the worst result for any major party since 1949. So what went wrong for the coalition? Well, as we see it, there are 3 main reasons. First, polls suggest that Australian voters liked Dutton less the more they saw of him, and Albanese had a big lead when it came to who Australians would prefer as their Prime Minister. Second, while Dutton's focus on economic issues, especially inflation, the cost of living, and the housing crisis, originally paid electoral dividends, a series of exaggerations and U-turns have undermined the coalition's claim to economic competence. For instance, Dutton claimed on multiple occasions that grocery prices had risen by 30% and electricity bills had risen by $1,300 under Labour. But neither of these claims are even remotely true, and inflation has actually markedly fallen in recent months. Similarly, Dutton criticised a recent tax cut introduced by Albanese as fiscally irresponsible, but simultaneously claimed that taxes would ultimately be lower under his government. Thirdly, Dutton has been tarnished by his association with Trump. Now, Dutton originally pitched himself as Australia's Trump whisperer, and was even nicknamed the Timu Trump by the Australian left for his conspicuously Trumpian policies, including implausibly large cuts to the civil service and a referendum on the deportation of criminals with dual citizenship. However, this has actually hurt Dutton electorally, because, well, Trump is pretty unpopular in Australia at the moment, for obvious reasons. Nonetheless, Albanese still has a lot to do. While his poll numbers improved during the campaign, this election was probably more about the coalition's failures than Labour's successes, and he'll need to make more progress on fixing the economy, and especially Australia's disastrous housing crisis, if he wants to win again. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you learn more about the world around you, and luckily for us, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, shares that same commitment. Their thousands of interactive lessons in maths, science, programming, data analysis, and AI are designed to help you learn by actually doing, rather than asking you to mindlessly memorize stuff. For instance, each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than watching lecture videos. This also helps you to build your critical thinking skills and become a better thinker. Brilliant's newly updated maths courses help you to establish a strong foundation in algebra. It then helps you build on this, teaching you how to conquer calculus, all while maintaining an emphasis on problem solving and reasoning. The thing I like best about this, though, is that their mathematical courses help you to develop your mathematical intuition and fluency, skills that you can use in the real world. As we've told you before, data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, scan the QR code on screen, or you can click the link in the description, and you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.